We're off the rails. Now we are trains ourselves. No wait and see. Welcome to this second video in our Rails mastery. Welcome to this second video in our series of lessons on Rails mastery. In this lesson, we look at Rails database setup, and we look particularly at SQLite, which is an embedded SQL database engine for Rails. SQLite stores our database in a single file. It has various advantages. It's serverless, it involves zero configuration. It's also self-contained and reliable. And we can use it on different platforms such as Mac, Windows, etc. There are some disadvantages. It doesn't fully support joins and can only add columns and not alter columns or drop columns. SQLite is a relational database, and a relational database is a collective set of multiple data sets organized by tables, records, and columns. Tables are the overarching term for a series of records, and the records are each of the instances within that table. The columns are each of the headings which we can look at to tell what each of the data types are within them. It's our standard language for interacting with related databases is structured query language, SQL. And the relationships include one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. They're extendable. Relational databases allow us to have an agile setup for our Rails applications. So we can add columns, take away columns, and add data to columns as we wish. So the Rails database setup, or at least the Rails database connections, are configured within our database.yaml in our Rails app. So SQLite, of course, is set up as part of the Rails new command, and the configuration is for different environments. So for development, we have here development.sqlite3, which is within our DB folder, and all of that data is contained within that one file. For test, which we can use for RSpec testing or mini-test testing, we've set up test.sqlite3, and for production we have a separate file called production.sqlite3. For the moment, we're just using development because we're just locally running our Rails application. The database is just a single file, as I mentioned, in db development SQLite3. Checking our database we can do with Rails DB to get into a SQLite console, and .help gives us a full list of commands you can use on the console. So when we're checking the database, we can look at the tables, and we see here schema migrations is a directory to record the migrations for our Rails DB migrate. And this allows for incremental changes and rollback, which allows us to be agile in our development for our Rails application. We can change and roll back any changes in our books table. In order to look at the books table, we can run .headers and .mode columns, and that allows us to look at the headers, ID, title, author, year, created at and updated at, and the columns put the data within those headings. Our command select all from books, semicolon, allows us to see all the instances, and we can see here that we've only got one record, which is ID1 Ruby on Rails tutorial, Michael Hartle, 2012. So we can also use a browser for SQLite, and DB Browser is a very common tool for this, and this allows us to also make queries through the tool and can make interacting with our relational database a bit easier, particularly when we have more than one table to look at. So we've looked at Rails SQLite, and we've noticed that it is the default Rails database. It uses a built-in command line viewer, and in our next lesson we're going to look at how migrations work on our databases, and that is really getting into agile development and changing and moving and adding columns to our databases, and adding particularly information to our databases through our migrations.